He looks radiant, doesn't he? Too radiant. His eyes gleam like a boy's, his smile disarms, his words dance around you like light. You think you've met a man untouched by time, someone who has stayed pure, spontaneous, alive, but something inside you hesitates. You can't name it, but you feel it, a hollowness behind the charm, a stillness that feels wrong. When a man looks younger than he is, it is not always a blessing, it is often a warning. Nature marks those who have lived, who have suffered, who have faced themselves. The lines on a face are not flaws, they are the script of a soul that has met its darkness. But when there are no lines, when time has left no trace, ask yourself, what did he refuse to see? There are men who preserve their youth not through innocence, but through denial. They have kept the mask of the boy because they never dared to become the man. They live untouched by remorse, unmarked by self-knowledge, unsoftened by sorrow. Their laughter hides fear, their vitality hides emptiness. They have not been purified by pain, only protected by avoidance. He will enchant you because his spirit feels light, almost too light. He will make you feel young again, alive again, wanted again. But soon you will see the cost. His world has no depth because he has banished it. He fears your emotion, evades your truth, vanishes when things grow real. You will sense it that he is missing something vital, something ancient and necessary. The man who looks younger than he is often hides a shadow older than time. He has buried it so deeply that it no longer touches his skin, but it waits beneath the surface, unseen, untransformed. Stay too long, and that shadow will rise through you. You will begin to carry his darkness, to feel his numbness, to age in his place. Do not mistake his youth for light. It is a mask forged by fear. Look beyond the smoothness, the charm, the laughter. If you find no trace of sorrow, no depth in his eyes, no stillness earned through suffering, turn away. For a man who has not aged in soul cannot love in truth. He hides something he has not yet dared to face, and if you do not leave, you will be the one who faces it for him. There are men who seem untouched by the slow erosion of time. Their faces are smooth, their gestures lively, their eyes restless with a youthful gleam. Yet when I meet such a man, I do not marvel, I hesitate. For I have learned that when nature leaves no trace, the soul has not yet lived. The one who refuses to age in body often refuses to grow in spirit. The ancients called him the puer aeternus, the eternal youth. He is the boy who lingers at the threshold of life, intoxicated by possibility, terrified of limitation. He moves from one delight to another, never letting the roots of experience penetrate the soil of his being. To live means to suffer transformation, but he desires only renewal without decay, pleasure without consequence. The eternal youth is not evil, but incomplete. He carries within him the beauty of dawn and the peril of never reaching noon. In him the creative impulse is strong, but it lacks the discipline of incarnation. He loves beginnings but flees duration. He is the spring that never yields to harvest, and thus the field of his soul remains barren though ever green. Age, in its true sense, is not measured in years but in wounds consciously endured. Each sorrow faced, each illusion surrendered, each truth accepted adds a wrinkle to the face and a light to the eyes. Without such marks, one is merely preserved, not transfigured. A man who has not been darkened by pain still belongs to the morning of the soul. He has not yet entered the day. Civilization has made a religion of youth. We worship freshness, vitality, and the bright surface of things. We forget that in nature, beauty is inseparable from decay. The rose's perfection lies in its transience. When a man resists aging, he resists the law that gives all life its rhythm, birth, growth, death, and rebirth. To remain young is to remain untested, uninitiated, unripe. What many call spirit is often only the buoyancy of immaturity. True spirit has gravity, born of the tension between heaven and earth. The man who refuses depth mistakes his weightlessness for transcendence. But what floats above all suffering is not divine, it is merely hollow. The spirit that never descends into the mud of existence becomes a ghost, luminous yet without life. I have often seen this archetype take possession of the modern man. He appears charming, intelligent, full of life, yet something within him feels empty. He cannot bear seriousness. Laughter must cover every silence. When confronted with emotion, he withdraws behind irony. He lives as if pursued by an invisible clock, terrified of the moment when the music stops. Behind this mask of vitality lies a secret fatigue. To remain forever young demands endless evasion of grief, responsibility, and self-confrontation. The pure does not rest because stillness would reveal his emptiness. He must keep dancing lest the silence swallow him. But what he calls freedom is only flight from the one encounter that could make him whole, the encounter with himself. Every human being wears a persona, a mask adapted to the demands of the world. But for the eternal youth, the mask has become his only face. He has identified so completely with the image of vitality that his soul, suffocated beneath the surface, has grown pale and weak. He mistakes approval for existence, applause for love, and movement for meaning. This identification with the mask is the tragedy of our age. We have forgotten that the persona is a tool, not a being. It protects, but also imprisons. The man who fears the loss of his youthful image guards it with increasing desperation. His charm grows forced, his optimism brittle. Beneath the smile, the soul trembles with the dread of invisibility. I have seen women drawn to such men, intoxicated by their lightness. They believe they have found a spirit untouched by corruption, but soon they feel the chill beneath the warmth. The poor cannot offer depth, for he has banished it. His affection is sincere but fleeting. His attention is bright but rootless. He loves as a butterfly lands briefly, beautifully, and without commitment. This incapacity for depth stems from the repression of darkness. When one hides sorrow, it does not disappear. It sinks into the unconscious and hardens there. What remains on the surface is brightness stripped of shadow, a blinding, sterile light. The man who never weeps becomes incapable of joy. The soul that avoids pain avoids life itself. The pure cannot bear tragedy, for tragedy demands acceptance of limitation. He prefers comedy, where all conflict resolves without consequence. Yet in fleeing suffering, he flees the gods. The ancients knew that wisdom is born from mourning. The man, untouched by grief, remains a child before the altar of life, worshipping pleasure but never knowing meaning. To age is to allow the soul to descend from the heights of fantasy into the depths of reality. It is to accept imperfection, to carry one's shadow, and to walk with the awareness of death. But the eternal youth shuns this descent. He hovers above his own existence, refusing gravity. Thus he never reaches the center where the self resides. Observe the smooth face that has known no struggle, it tells no story. The lines of the aged are sacred script. They record the dialogue between man and destiny. When there are no lines, no trace of conflict, one must ask, has this soul lived, or has it only avoided life? Smoothness may hide not peace, but sterility. The myth of Narcissus captures this illusion perfectly. Narcissus gazed into the water and fell in love with his reflection. He mistook the image for reality and perished in its depths. The pure, too, is in love with his reflection, the image of youth, purity, spontaneity. He does not realize that the reflection is lifeless and that every kiss he gives to it is a kiss of death. In Narcissus, I see the tragedy of modern man. Enchanted by his own image, he loses contact with the living depths beneath. The water that mirrors his beauty is the unconscious itself, silent, dark, and fertile. But instead of descending into it, he remains on the surface, feeding upon his own illusion. He worships what should have been sacrificed. To cling to youth is to refuse the call of transformation. Life demands that we shed our skins, that we die to what we have been, so that the soul may be reborn. The pure fears this death. He seeks immortality in stasis. Yet what does not die cannot live anew. His unwrinkled face becomes his tomb, his laughter the echo of a heart that has ceased to grow. One must understand that nature marks us not to humiliate, but to initiate. Every wrinkle, every scar, every weary sigh is a sign that the soul has participated in the great mystery. The man who lacks these signs is not blessed. He is excluded. Time has not ignored him. It has not yet begun its work upon him. He stands outside the temple, knocking, afraid to enter. When we meet such a man, we must look beyond the sheen of youth to the quality of his presence. Does he carry the stillness of one who has suffered, or the agitation of one who flees himself? Is there depth in his eyes, or only the restless sparkle of avoidance? These are not aesthetic questions, they are moral and spiritual ones, for the soul matures only through suffering consciously born. To refuse suffering is to refuse wisdom. The pure's lightness may dazzle for a time, but soon it wearies the spirit. We long for gravity, for the weight of a heart that has descended into darkness and returned with compassion. Only such a man can love in truth, for only he has faced the night within himself. The refusal to age is not innocence, it is defiance of nature's law. The gods punish such pride with emptiness. The youth who mocks time becomes its slave, chasing vitality as it slips through his hands. He may charm the world, but he cannot deceive the unconscious, which knows the truth of his arrested becoming. At last, I must say, beware the man who looks too young, whose eyes gleam without sorrow, whose smile never fades. He has not yet entered the kingdom of reality. He stands at the gate, radiant and doomed. He may awaken your desire, your pity, even your motherly instinct, but he will not awaken your soul, for his own is still asleep beneath the mask. The eternal youth is not beyond redemption, yet his salvation lies not in preserving his charm, but in relinquishing it. Only when he allows the boy to die can the man be born. Only when he faces his darkness can his light become genuine. To age is to enter truth. To resist it is to remain forever exiled in the glittering wasteland of illusion. So I end this reflection with a warning whispered in compassion. Every man who clings to youth betrays his destiny. He refuses the descent through which life becomes meaningful. He remains suspended between heaven and earth, charming but hollow, radiant but rootless. And those who love him will pay the price for the soul he would not face. Every man carries within him a darkness equal to his light, yet few dare to look upon it. The one who clings to the mask of youth has made a silent pact with his shadow. You shall remain unseen, and I shall remain untroubled. But the unconscious keeps no contracts. What is refused by consciousness does not die, it waits. The shadow is the soul's forgotten half, composed of all that a man will not admit to himself: his cowardice, his envy, his lust, his fear, his longing for power. These are not demons to be exorcised, but vital forces seeking recognition. When they are denied, they turn poisonous. The man who looks younger than he is has fed this poison to his own depths. His smoothness is not purity, but repression. He has not transcended darkness, he has only buried it. The shadow does not age because it has never been exposed to the light of consciousness. It remains as ancient and untouched as when he first refused to feel. Thus, while his skin glows with youth, his inner being decays unseen. Such a man preserves not life, but illusion. His vitality is counterfeit, like a fire painted on the wall. He believes himself alive because he is restless. Yet restlessness is not life, it is escape from the stillness where truth dwells. The refusal to age is the refusal to be still, for in stillness the shadow begins to speak. There is a secret terror that drives him. He fears mortality, yet he fears even more the awakening of the soul that mortality brings. He imagines that by keeping his heart untouched, he can defy death. But the one who will not die inwardly is already spiritually dead. The unaged man is not preserved by the gods. He is kept frozen by fear. In dreams, such men often meet figures of darkness, strangers who mock them, children who accuse them, women who vanish when embraced. These images reveal the soul's complaint. The psyche longs for wholeness. It cannot tolerate one-sided brightness. The shadow, excluded from the feast of life, becomes hungry and begins to haunt the dreamer. When the shadow is not faced, it seeks expression through others. The man who will not feel his own pain will make others feel it for him. He becomes a magician of projection. His charm disarms, his humor seduces, yet behind every smile he is transferring the burden of his denied sorrow to those who love him. He attracts women of depth, for the unconscious seeks compensation. The woman's soul, attuned to the unseen, senses his emptiness and mistakes it for mystery. She feels his woundedness and wishes to heal it. Without knowing, she becomes the vessel of his Edie. Shadow the one who weeps what he cannot, who feels what he has buried. In such unions, the balance of nature is inverted. The woman grows heavy with the pain that belongs to him. She ages in spirit while he remains light. Her dreams fill with darkness and water, symbols of the unconscious rising. She becomes the mother to his childlike psyche, carrying his denied mortality as though it were her own. This dynamic is not love but possession. The shadow has crossed the threshold and entered the relationship. What he calls tenderness is dependency. What she calls devotion is sacrifice. The man feels free because she carries the weight. The woman feels old because she bears two souls, her own and his. In this way, the unaged man feeds upon the vitality of those around him. He does not do so out of malice, but from unconscious need. The shadow demands expression, and since he cannot face it, it expresses itself through others. His charm becomes parasitic. His light drains the energy of all who approach it. The psyche is merciful but relentless. What is denied within will reappear without until it is seen. The woman who bears his sorrow will one day awaken and recognize that the darkness she feels is not her own. When she withdraws it, he will be forced to meet the emptiness he has long evaded. The shadow's revenge is revelation. I have witnessed such awakenings. The man suddenly feels hollow. His world loses color. What he mistook for freedom now feels like exile. The laughter that once protected him echoes like a ghost. He begins to glimpse the shadow at last, not as an enemy, but as the other half of his soul, demanding to be known, but not all endure this confrontation. Many turn away again, seeking new faces to carry their darkness. They wander from love to love, from joy to joy, pursued by the same specter. The more they run, the stronger the shadow grows. Each evasion deepens the curse of youth, a body that glows while the soul withers, unseen. The myth of Peter Pan speaks clearly of this condition. Peter lives in Neverland, surrounded by lost boys who, like him, refuse to grow. He can fly, but he cannot descend. He fights imaginary enemies but never meets the real one, time. His laughter conceals terror. His freedom is captivity. He is not a hero, but a soul caught between birth and death. In truth, every man must leave Neverland. He must descend into the dark forest of his own soul, where the shadow dwells. There he will find not demons, but his forgotten humanity. The tears he feared to shed, the anger he feared to own, the weakness he refused to confess, all these wait to be embraced. Only then can his youth become strength rather than evasion. The shadow that is integrated becomes a source of renewal. It grounds the man in reality, gives depth to his laughter and weight to his love. His eyes, once shallow with avoidance, begin to darken with compassion. He no longer fears the sorrow of others, for he has met his own. In facing his darkness, he finds his soul's gravity. But the man who will not take this path condemns those near him to carry his unfinished life. He becomes a thief of vitality. His relationships crumble, for nothing can grow in the shadow of denial. What he calls freedom is only bondage to fear. What he calls youth is only avoidance of truth. The soul does not demand perfection, it demands participation. Even sin, when suffered consciously, can serve transformation. But innocence preserved through denial leads only to sterility. The poor who refuses to fall remains forever above the world, untouched, unliving, unredeemed. His shadow remains beneath, gathering force in silence. In every woman who senses that her vitality diminishes beside such a man, the unconscious whispers, "You are carrying what he refused." She must release it. To rescue him is to lose herself. Only when she returns his darkness to him can he begin his descent. The path of salvation must be walked by the one who has sinned against his own depth. At last, the truth must be spoken. The man who will not meet his shadow condemns those near him to carry it. He calls himself free, yet he enslaves others to his unconscious. He calls himself alive, yet he lives in flight from the one thing that gives life meaning, the acceptance of one's whole being, light and dark alike. Freedom does not lie in perpetual brightness. It lies in the reconciliation of opposites, in the marriage of day and night within the soul. The man who looks younger than he is has not yet made this marriage. He lives divorced from his darkness, forever seeking brides to wed his missing half. But no woman, no pleasure, No success can complete what only consciousness can unite. The time must come when he looks into the mirror and no longer sees the boy. The illusion will shatter, and the shadow will step forth. For only when he sees the darkness reflected in his own eyes can he begin to age truly, to ripen, to deepen, to live. Thus I say, what does not age in him is not holy but unhealed. His untouched light is the light of repression, his youth the symptom of refusal. Until he descends into his shadow, he will remain radiant and unreal, a man whose beauty hides a wound older than himself. There is always a story behind the man who looks younger than he is. Beneath the smoothness of his face lies a history that was never lived to completion. Somewhere in his past, a fracture occurred, a severing from the archetypal father, from the law of life that commands growth through suffering. He did not rebel against time for no reason. His youthfulness is not vitality, it is resistance born of a wound. Every man is born twice, first from the body of his mother, then from the spirit of his father. The first birth gives him life, the second gives him meaning. Yet many remain halfway, hovering between the maternal and the paternal realms, unable to cross from the warmth of dependence into the solitude of responsibility. The man who clings to youth is such a one. He still seeks the comfort of the mother while wearing the mask of the man. He has not met the father within himself, and thus has not been initiated into his own strength. In ancient cultures, initiation marked this passage. The boy was taken from his mother, often violently, and led into darkness. He was stripped, tested, humiliated, made to confront pain and fear. Then, in symbolic death, he was reborn as a man. The gods demanded this descent. Without it, no man could be trusted with power, with woman, or with spirit. But modern man has abolished the rites. The result is a generation of grown children, aged in body, unformed in soul. The man who resists aging has unconsciously refused this second birth. No father stood before him to demand his death and rebirth, so he remains the son, charming, restless, without anchor. He compensates with brilliance and seduction, believing himself exceptional. Yet behind this lies terror, the fear of being ordinary, of falling from the mother's gaze into the cold eyes of the father who demands that he become real. If one has never known the blessing or the curse of a true father, the archetype itself turns against him. It becomes a ghost that haunts him in the night, a stern voice whispering that he has failed to become what he was meant to be. And because he cannot face this voice, he flees into perpetual beginnings. He changes careers, lovers, philosophies, always hoping the next dawn will erase the memory of the night he has not yet faced. The eternal youth despises authority because it mirrors what he lacks. He mocks tradition, sneers at limits, distrusts commitment. But behind this rebellion lies longing for a firm hand to challenge him, for a voice to say, "This far and no further." He has mistaken freedom for absence of guidance, when in truth freedom requires form. The Father provides that form as the banks shape the river. Without them, the water disperses into a swamp. I have seen this father wound take many forms. Sometimes the father was weak, incapable of bestowing blessing. Sometimes he was distant, lost in his own struggles. Sometimes he was tyrannical, so that the son grew up vowing never to resemble him. In all cases, the connection failed. The son's masculine principle remained unformed, floating like a kite without wind, and so he clings to his youth, for it is the only territory he can claim as his own. The pure fears the father because the father symbolizes reality. The father says, "You must suffer, you must labor, you must die to what you imagine yourself to be." These words sound cruel to the untested heart. The mother's love says, "You are perfect as you are." The father's love says, "Become who you must." To accept the latter is to lose innocence forever, but without that loss, no real man is born. In our time, the collective father is dead. Society offers no initiations, no sacred boundaries, no acknowledgement of the soul's trials. Men drift, guided by appetite and entertainment. They remain boys competing for admiration rather than men grounded in purpose. The unaged man is the symptom of this cultural neurosis. He is not an exception, he is a mirror. In him we see our civilization's refusal to mature. The man who has not faced his father cannot face himself. For the father is not merely an external figure, but an archetypal force representing law, order, and mortality. To meet him inwardly is to confront the limits of one's ego. The puer, however, believes that limits destroy freedom. He does not realize that without them, freedom collapses into chaos. In fleeing the father, he flees structure, meaning, and the possibility of enduring love. He believes that charm will save him, that spontaneity will redeem him, that youth is proof of spirit. But what he calls charm is often a plea for permission. What he calls spontaneity is fear of consequence, and what he calls spirit is merely avoidance of discipline. The boy smiles to distract from the void behind his eyes, for he has never seen himself reflected in the gaze of a man who said, "I see you, and you are enough." Without the father's presence, the boy seeks his image elsewhere, often in women. He turns lovers into teachers, partners into saviors. Each woman becomes the vessel of the father's missing blessing. He worships her wisdom, her strength, her endurance, but secretly he envies her, resents her, and fears her judgment. The energy meant for initiation is misdirected into erotic fascination and emotional dependency. He alternates between adoration and withdrawal, unable to stand as an equal. Many women sense this imbalance. They feel both desired and burdened, as though they must raise the man they love. They mistake his need for devotion, his dependence for depth. Yet what he craves is not love, but initiation. He wants someone to affirm his existence without demanding his transformation. This is why he cannot bear the mature woman for long. Her eyes remind him of the father's. He seeks instead those who will adore the boy and never summon the man. The wound of the father is not healed by finding new figures to replace him. It can only be healed through confrontation with the archetype within. The man must turn inward and meet the image of the father as it arises in dream and fantasy. The stern judge, the silent king, the distant god. He must speak to this figure and bear its silence. Only when he accepts its demand for limitation will he gain his strength. In myth, the young god Tammuz must descend into the underworld to renew the fertility of the earth. His lover, Inanna, follows him, but she too must be stripped of all adornment before she can pass through the gates. In this descent, both male and female are purified by death. Such is the pattern of all initiation. One must die to the image of youth to awaken to the power of maturity. The man who refuses descent keeps his beauty but loses his soul. When a man refuses this symbolic death, his vitality turns destructive. The energies that should serve creation become restless, seeking outlets in indulgence and conquest. He cannot remain alone, for solitude confronts him with his emptiness. He must fill the silence with admiration, adventure, or noise. Yet no experience satisfies, for what he seeks is not pleasure, but the missing father, the authority of meaning itself. He may imagine that success will prove his worth, but success only amplifies the void. He may pursue spiritual practices, but without humility, they serve only as decoration for the ego. Even faith becomes another escape if it avoids the descent into shadow. The father within will not be appeased by gestures. He demands blood, the blood of the false image, the sacrifice of the boy who would not die. In the alchemical tradition, the transformation of lead into gold begins with the stage of nigredo, the blackening. It is the moment when the old identity decays, when the light disappears and the soul descends into confusion. The man who has never entered nigredo has never begun the work. He has polished his surface, not purified his substance. He glitters, but he does not shine. I have often said that suffering is the only true initiator. When a man finally allows himself to break, the spirit enters. The collapse of his illusions, the humiliation of failure, the grief of loss, these are the sacred rites of our time. In them, the Father reappears, not as a tyrant, but as the voice of truth. To age is to surrender to this process willingly, to say, "Let the old die that the real may be born." The woman who loves such a man often plays an unconscious role in his initiation. Her disappointment becomes his mirror. When she ceases to mother him and demands authenticity, he stands before the archetypal gate. If he accepts the pain of her withdrawal, if he chooses to bear solitude rather than flee to another embrace, the transformation begins. But if he runs, he repeats the pattern, forever youthful, forever incomplete. The poor's laughter often hides a secret grief. It is the sound of one who has never wept enough. Beneath his charm lies the frozen child who once longed for the father's gaze and never received it. That longing, unacknowledged, becomes pride. That pride becomes fear, and that fear becomes eternal adolescence. The only cure is mourning the willingness to grieve the father who never came. To grieve is to accept reality. The father may have been absent, harsh, or blind, but he was also human. When the son forgives him, he releases himself from the tyranny of the past. Then he can hear the deeper voice, the archetypal father who speaks through conscience, through the order of nature, through the silent weight of responsibility. This voice calls every man to his destiny. The journey from son to man is the longest pilgrimage. It leads through disappointment, through loneliness, through the collapse of youthful ideals. But beyond these trials lies strength, humility, and the serenity of one who has accepted the human condition. Only the man who has embraced limitation can act with true freedom. Only he who has lost the father outwardly can find him within. When the man accepts this death, something miraculous occurs. The poor's brilliance darkens into gold. His charm becomes presence, his restlessness becomes depth, his laughter softens with compassion. He no longer fears aging, for he has met eternity within. The lines on his face become the script of initiation, each one a scar written by the hand of meaning. But until this descent happens, his tenderness will remain counterfeit. He may speak of love, but it will lack gravity. He may promise fidelity, but he will flee at the first sign of truth. For he has not yet faced the God who demands sacrifice. Youth without initiation is illusion, and illusion cannot sustain love. The woman who binds herself to such a man will awaken in sorrow, carrying the pain that was meant to be his rite of passage. Therefore, when you see a man untouched by time, do not envy him. Look instead for the story that he hides. If you find no sign of the father's wound accepted and transformed, no humility, no gravity, no sorrow, know that you are speaking to a soul that has not yet descended. His beauty is not peace, it is postponement. His lightness is not spirit, it is fear. Every man must one day leave the garden of youth and enter the desert of maturity. There he meets the silence of God, the presence of death, and the truth of his own insignificance. Yet in that very desolation, he finds freedom. For the boy who dies willingly becomes the man who can live eternally, and the face that once seemed young now shines with the solemn radiance of one who has met the Father within and found him to be love. There comes a moment in every man's life when youth begins to loosen its hold, when the laughter that once concealed fear grows tired, when the face in the mirror is no longer a mask but a question. If he has not fled too long from himself, he will recognize in that question the voice of the soul. It does not accuse, it summons, it asks him to descend. To descend is not to fall into ruin, but to return to origin. The path of spiritual maturity always leads downward into humility, into grief, into limitation. The man who has lived only in ascent knows only half of life's law. The other half waits below, in the valley where death and meaning are one. The refusal to age is the refusal to make this sacred descent. The ego resists with all its strength. It clings to achievements, pleasures, vitality, anything that proves it still matters. Yet the unconscious cannot be deceived. It begins to send signs, dreams of darkness, sudden losses, inexplicable fatigue, a sense that the world has grown hollow. These are not punishments, they are invitations. The soul is calling the man home. In the ancient art of alchemy, this stage is called the nigredo, the blackening. It is the first and most painful phase of transformation. All brightness is extinguished, all certainty dissolved. The man feels abandoned by life, but what dies here is not the self, it is the false self, the boy who would not die. Only in darkness can the true gold of the soul begin to form. The pure, if he accepts this descent, begins to discover a new light, one that does not dazzle but warms. It is the light that shines through cracks rather than from the surface. He learns that beauty lies not in perfection but in truth. The lines on his face, once despised, become sacred hieroglyphs inscribed by time itself. They are the record of his transformation. Aging, rightly understood, is not decay but ripening. The fruit that fears ripeness fears to fulfill its purpose. So too with the soul. To age in truth is to gather substance, to become sweet, dense, and nourishing. The unaged man remains sour because he has not yet been exposed to the sun of consciousness and the frost of suffering. Without both, there can be no flavor, no individuality, no wisdom. He who has descended no longer seeks admiration, he seeks meaning. The applause of the world becomes as fleeting as a summer storm. He listens instead for the quiet voice within, the one that speaks only when the noise of ambition has faded. This voice tells him not what to become, but what to be. It does not command perfection, only presence. The descent into age also brings reconciliation with the shadow. The man no longer fears the dark impulses within him. He recognizes them as part of his wholeness. Anger becomes strength, desire becomes tenderness, fear becomes humility. The opposites, once enemies, begin to converse. In this dialogue, the self, the totality of the psyche, emerges as a living reality. To the outsider, this transformation may seem like loss. The man grows quieter, less dazzling. He withdraws from the games of youth. But within him, a vastness opens. The restless current of the poor still flows, but it now serves a deeper sea. What was once vanity becomes contemplation. What was once flight becomes prayer. He has ceased to perform and begun to exist. The woman who meets such a man will sense it immediately. His presence no longer intoxicates, it consoles. His gaze does not seek to possess, but to understand. In his silence there is no evasion but peace. She feels not the thrill of infatuation, but the calm of recognition, the sense that she is seen not as an object of desire, but as a companion of the soul. For such a man, love itself is transformed. It is no longer a pursuit of completion through another, but a communion between two who have each met their own depths. The passion that once burned wildly now glows steadily, like a hearth that warms rather than consumes. In this love, the anima and animus, those inner figures of the opposite sex, are reconciled within and without. The fear of aging vanishes, for he no longer identifies with the body alone. He has discovered that what grows old is only the vessel. The inhabitant is eternal. The more he accepts mortality, the more he feels the pulse of the immortal. Death is no longer an intruder but a teacher, reminding him daily to live with reverence and to love without delay. When the poor finally accepts age, he discovers a paradox. He feels younger than ever. But this youth is not the fragile brightness of denial. It is the eternal freshness of the soul, reborn through suffering. His laughter carries sorrow, his joy carries gravity, his eyes shine with the peace of one who has embraced the totality of being. He has become the true senex, the wise old man, whose youth is hidden within his age. Such a man knows that life's purpose is not endless pleasure, but conscious participation in its rhythm. He does not seek to be exceptional, he seeks to be real. He understands that each day lived with awareness is a victory over unconsciousness. His strength lies not in conquest but in surrender, the surrender to what is. Many fear that aging will rob them of passion, but the opposite is true. When the illusions fall away, passion deepens. It is no longer the fever of desire, but the fire of devotion to life, to truth, to the mystery that sustains all things. The mature man loves not for possession, but for participation. He loves the soul of the world as his own. In this stage, the alchemical nigredo gives way to albedo, the whitening. The dark night begins to yield to dawn. The man perceives that every loss was preparation, every wound an opening, every death a new birth. What once appeared as cruelty now reveals itself as grace. He realizes that aging is not a decline, but a revelation, the unveiling of the eternal within the temporal. The wise know that the soul grows luminous when it ceases to resist the passage of time. For time is not the enemy of spirit, but its instrument. It chisels the human form into a vessel fit to contain light. The unaged man has never been sculpted by time's hands. He remains formless, untouched, unfinished. Only through the slow erosion of ego does the inner shape emerge. It is the same with love. A love that has aged is a love that has been tested. It has endured disillusionment, forgiveness, silence. The man who has aged in soul no longer confuses intensity with depth. He understands that the truest love is not constant excitement, but enduring presence. The one who remains through all seasons has entered eternity while still in time. I have said that every wrinkle is a hieroglyph. Each one tells of a confrontation with destiny, a sorrow endured, a temptation resisted, a joy accepted with gratitude. To erase them would be to erase the text of one's own becoming. The man who cherishes his lines honors the self that wrote them. His face becomes a living mandala, revealing the wholeness he has achieved. In the end, it is not youth that saves, but meaning. The body may weaken, the hair may whiten, the senses may dull, but the consciousness that has faced itself grows ever sharper. The man who has lived deeply reaches old age not as a ruin, but as a temple. Within him burns the quiet flame of the eternal. He has become transparent to the divine. It is from such men that the world draws its wisdom. They are not loud, but their presence shapes the atmosphere around them. In their company, one feels the reality of the soul. They speak little, for their silence carries more truth than speech. The light they emit is not the glare of youth, but the steady glow of the heart that has passed through darkness and learned to see. To age in this way is to participate in the mystery of transformation that pervades all creation. The seed must decay to become the tree. The star must collapse to give birth to light. So too must the ego fall into the depths of the unconscious to awaken the self. The descent into age is the soul's participation in this cosmic rhythm. He who refuses to age resists the law of life and thus becomes its victim. He who embraces it becomes its instrument. Such a man no longer fears change, for he knows that all things are changing eternally. He no longer fears loss, for he understands that nothing real can be lost. He no longer fears death, for he has already died and been reborn many times. At the end of the journey, the man who once feared aging looks back upon his life and sees a pattern. Every pain led to knowledge, every ending concealed a beginning. Every humiliation was the touch of the unseen hand that shaped his soul. The youth he clung to was but the shadow of this deeper vitality, the eternal life that time itself reveals. And now he understands the secret. To be young forever, one must consent to grow old. For true youth belongs not to the body but to the spirit, and the spirit is renewed each time it surrenders to truth. The boy sought immortality by denying death. The man attains it by embracing it. What he once feared as loss becomes fulfillment. So I say, do not flee from age. Let the seasons have their way with you. Let sorrow carve your features and time soften your pride. Each mark is a blessing, each fading a revelation. In the twilight of life, when the body bends and the heart slows, the soul rises like the evening star, serene, luminous, eternal. The man who has lived thus no longer hides. He has no mask to maintain, no illusion to defend. His face is his confession, his life his testimony. In him the opposites have met, youth and age, light and dark, man and child, heaven and earth. He is no longer divided. He has become what he always sought, whole. And so I end where we began. When you see a man who looks younger than he is, look closer. If you find no trace of sorrow, no depth in his eyes, no gravity in his silence, turn away. For he has not yet descended, he has not yet been born. But if you meet a man whose face bears the marks of struggle, whose eyes are calm with compassion, whose presence brings peace stay, you have met one who has aged in truth, and in him the eternal has become visible.